APR. And I think it's kind of interesting to conceptually that bet on the value having changed in 7 days is kind of similar to when you do traditional liquidity mining. It's similar to the mechanism of impermanent loss, except in this case, it's a little bit different since you're only betting on the price of Fox itself. And for users who are interested in holding more Fox tokens long term, bonds are a really excellent way to be able to compound your stack of Fox tokens without being exposed to the impermanent loss mechanism of liquidity provision.
That's awesome. So I think another cool way to think about this is just another cool opportunity that Fox holders now have, basically, for trading.
Yeah, absolutely.
Super cool. So would you guys like to do any kind of screen sharing and kind of walk us through Olympus? If not, I can pass it over to Marley and John to see if they have any questions.
I think it would be cool to do some screen sharing to just show people what it looks like for the Olympus Pro Marketplace. I do believe we're over capacity though for screen sharing in Discord.
We can, so there's a Zoom link in the stage chat. I'll post it again right at the bottom. You guys can join that and screen share, and anyone in the audience can join that to follow along.
Yeah, we got to figure out your multicast system for like Twitch and stuff, but we're doing Zoom and recording it and stuff like that. So,
and Tyler, I ran into this yesterday. You may need to make sure that participants can screen share.
Yes, and Ron's working on it, so I'm excited to see what he's coming up with. If you didn't, I think Ron was there yesterday for the Olympus Dow, just while we're working on screen sharing. I was very impressed with y'all's like presentation quality. It was really cool. So lots of stuff for us to learn from DAO to DAO.
Yeah, that was really awesome to see. So much love from the OMI community and from the Fox community. And then since then, we've seen a lot of OMIs hanging out in the ShapeShift Discord and a lot of Foxes hanging out in the Olympus Discord. So really awesome to see that DAO to DAO collaboration.
We love DAO to DAO collaboration.
D to D.
Future of work. Let's go.
Yeah, that was cool. The conversation yesterday definitely went pretty deep into future of work and not just talking about ShapeShift and Olympus, but just more kind of the macro landscape that we're all playing in. It was really interesting. All right, Tex, were you able to get into the Zoom? Yeah, I see your screen sharing now. Perfect.
Yeah, you guys can see my screen? All right, great. Cool. So this is the Olympus Pro bond marketplace, and maybe we can demo what it looks like for Olympus itself first. So this is our bond marketplace for Olympus, where we actually use our bond mechanism to accumulate these assets for the treasury that back each ohm in circulation. And so currently the price of ohm is at roughly $1,100. And these are the different prices that users can purchase a bond at for giving these assets to the protocol. And this is where I mentioned that when we generalize this to other partners, they're specifically interested in owning their liquidity. And maybe I can open up one thing as a quick aside to kind of show the benefits of owning liquidity for a protocol. So this is our Dune dashboard put together by our other policy lead, Shadow. Just really excellent dashboard here. And when we look at accumulating our own liquidity, these are kind of good charts to keep in mind, where the traditional pool 2 liquidity model is this blue area where we incentivized the ohm frax pool. And as you can see, there was a certain market depth when we initialized this pool. And when we launched our bond mechanism, this is where market participants give liquidity to the protocol and we accumulate ownership of our liquidity pools. And now you ask, maybe why is this important for protocols? Well, one, this is a long-term asset for us to hold and ensure that market participants can always have a trading partner for Ohm. And in a similar way, this also actually generates revenue for the protocol. And so from owning our own liquidity in the last 6 months, we've generated $6.4 million in LP fees. And this is the value add that we think we can provide for other partners. So currently, and right after this AMA, we're going to be meeting with the ShapeShift team to initialize the final bond contract, and then we will have you guys up on our bond marketplace this afternoon. So these are the different protocols that we're live with, where a couple of them have already sold out due to high demand for these bonds. But essentially, if you were looking at providing liquidity to the protocol, you would go and get your LP tokens. And I know many people already own Fox ETH LP tokens. So you would go to click bond. And then here on bond, it would show the market price of Fox versus the bond price, give you a quick overview of the discount that you would see on those Fox tokens, as well as vesting over 7 days. And then it would give you your maximum amount of Fox tokens available due to the maximum bond size. And you would actually go and click the bond button, which would be available if I owned Pendle ETH tokens. And you can also inspect the bond contract itself on Etherscan from here.
Super cool. Really helpful to see it in action. And also, I think important to note that that 10% rate that you see is over 7 days. So if you annualize that, especially if you're compounding that, it becomes a really nice, healthy triple-digit APR that we like to see.
It's pretty powerful. I was actually when I was mentioning being able to compound your Fox stack, the way to kind of look at this is if you compounded a 10% discount over the course of a year every week.
Yep.
You would get roughly this. So it's 10% every week. You would get roughly 14K APY. And this is kind of how Olympus has such a high APY as well, by the way.
The power of compounding. We just got a question from Eric in the chat. It says, Olympus folks, what does the term pool 2 refer to?
Oh, that's a really good question. So pool 2 is a traditional liquidity provision. So the problem that we're helping to solve here is that, for example, if we were to look at, let's say, ALCX ETH, this is a pool 2 incentives where you're pooling two assets, ALCX and ETH, or in ShapeShift's example, Fox and ETH, to provide some benefit to the protocol. And it provides you with LP token, or sorry, the governance tokens as rewards for providing that liquidity. That's a really good question.
Sorry, I was typing in the pool, and yeah, the typing in the chat. And pool 2, yeah, is oftentimes considered kind of like the riskier liquidity pool because if a project is also doing liquidity mining, because then the main risk that people are worried about is this risk of permanent loss and the risk of sell pressure when a lot of tokens are being pumped into the market. And that is pretty much the problem that Olympus Pro is solving. And yeah, really cool to see those charts and the fact that you guys were able to acquire pretty much 100% of your liquidity. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. Yeah, we have a 99.9% of our Ohm Frax pool as well as the Ohm DAI pool. And we're actually currently bootstrapping another liquidity pool with Ohm LUSD. And that can be seen here. Mine is not updating for some reason. but currently, I believe, there we go. We currently have accumulated $42 million of liquidity in this pool over the course of the last 10 days.
That's really powerful. So people can still go provide more liquidity, but at this point, it's like almost all of the liquidity that gets provided is getting bonded. And every time people are buying more of those tokens from the pool, the Olympus DAO is actually earning trading fees. It's really impressive to see just like all these free market participants, how they really are driven by self-interest. And if you can put it in their best interest to sell their liquidity pool tokens to the DAO, people will. And we're seeing that in action right now. Just with we launched the second round of liquidity mining, and it's really just amazing to see just in a matter of days all of this liquidity migrate from the original staking contract to the second staking contract. It's so cool to see all these free market participants coordinating, basically being coordinated kind of by that invisible hand.
Yeah, it's really powerful mechanism, and traditionally the pool 2 liquidity mining incentives has been the primary way that protocols can actually use market incentives to attract liquidity for their protocol, but they still don't own that liquidity. And the concept that we try and reinforce for bonds is that pool 2 liquidity mining is like renting your liquidity, whereas bonding allows you to own your liquidity.
I think it's a really powerful analogy. Also, I think something that could be helpful right now is if we just look at the actual proposal that passed, we could look at some of the numbers to see basically how much Fox are we spending on this and how much liquidity does the protocol hope to own. I just posted the link to the proposal in the stage chat too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I think that will be something for the ShapeShift community to pay close attention to, is to just get an idea of like how often are we selling out these bonds and how much liquidity do we want to acquire. So as Olympus talked about here, they've acquired nearly all of their liquidity in some pools, which is pretty incredible. That isn't necessarily our goal in this first bonding program, but if the community really liked it and we had a lot of demand for these bonds, we could up the amount that we're willing to spend in Fox to acquire this liquidity from this initial proposal without needing to deploy a new contract or anything once this is up. So it'll be really cool to watch that and see how the demand goes over these first weeks and months.
Yeah, absolutely. And because of the power of compounding that discount you get on Fox, one of the success criteria that we marked for a successful bond program is seeing consistently less than 10% on the discount rate. So I would encourage ShapeShift community members to keep an eye on that discount rate. And if you mentally anchor around how you can compound your bonds over the course of this program, you can really think through how this is a really powerful mechanism to get more and more Fox tokens. So pulling up the proposal itself, we're allocating. When I say the reward savings in here, it's just mentioned that the reward rate reduction that just went into effect decreased the emissions per day by roughly 57,000 Fox. And so we're taking half of those savings in some sense and allocating to this bond program to target $1.5 million of protocol owned liquidity over the next 4.5 months.
Awesome. So yeah, if at the end of this 4.5 months, we can hope to own $1.5 million of liquidity, and we're doing that spending less Fox than we've spent over the past 3 months just to rent that liquidity. So really excited for this experiment. And as John mentioned, one of the cool things about the Olympus Pro contracts is that we can update them in the middle of the program. We don't have to wait until the end of this 4.5 month program. We don't have to launch new contracts. If we're really liking it, the community can vote to allocate even more Fox to this program.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, and for the community listening, there's a world where we decide that this is actually the best way to go, and we either want to do a drastically reduced liquidity mining program at the end of the 4.5 months, or none at all, because partway through we wanted to up our ability to acquire these bonds and gain a much more considerable share of our own liquidity. So that could be really cool, and it's definitely something that I'm hoping the tokenomics workstream pays close attention to and the community at large is discussing as we go, because there's a ton of opportunity there. I'm personally very bullish on this and would like to see us acquire far more than 1.5 million, but I think it was a good start.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it as well.
So I'm curious on like what you all see in terms of how the demand tends to fluctuate with these bonds. You know, because you've all seen it pre-Olympus, so obviously they've been in pretty high demand for you all with how much of these you've acquired since the beginning of the Olympus DAO. But do you see like certain market conditions lead to a lot more bonding than others? Is it simply like if the token price is going up, that's more likely to lead to more bonding, or do you see pretty consistent demand week over week?
That's actually a really great question. So what we've seen here is on the screen that I have up, this is our discount on Olympus bonds. And what you can actually see is that occasionally there are these high spikes in the discount itself. And that's generally when the market anticipates that there's going to be a decline in the price of ohm over the vesting period. So in times when, you know, the market expects that the price of Fox will be increasing, I think you can see heavy demand for bonding as users kind of mentally anchor that discount for 7 days in the future with some near-term catalysts. And then as far as low bond demand, that's usually when users will think that maybe in 7 days the price of the token will decline.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Yeah, I guess I'm just curious if you've seen any sort of other like weird action with these bonding programs. Like, is there a certain, because obviously the discount itself fluctuates based on like I guess that would be a good thing to explain. How often does that discount rate adjust, and like what does it look at to decide what the current rate is?
Abby Pub, do you want to weigh in on some weird bond conditions and then also the discount mechanism?
Yeah, for sure. So the way that I guess specifically how the bond mechanism works is based on a control variable that the policy group sets. So it'll be I guess the Fox DAO will set that variable will determine how quickly the discount normally gets improved. So you'll see more and more discount over a certain amount of time, depending on how we set this, what we call a BCV or bond control variable. In essence, the lower the bond control variable goes, it means the lower amount of time it takes to get from, for example, maybe a 10% premium to a 5% discount. So if we take just like a very specific number, like 10,000 BCV would get you from 10% premium to 5% discount in a day or something like that. If you lower it further, it takes maybe a half a day, or if you raise it, it takes 2 days. So that's kind of how it normally works. I know we just discussed about kind of these abnormal market conditions where a price spike might kind of inflate our capacity a little bit and lead to more emissions at the same BCV. But yeah, in the normal case, that's kind of how that works.
So we're getting some questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Willie.
Yeah, we're getting some questions in the chat around the fees that Ohm does charge here, and also I think just giving some clarity around how the Fox that Olympus DAO earns. You guys don't plan to sell or anything, right? In fact, Fox, doesn't it become one of the reserve assets backing Ohm?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the benefit for Olympus is that the fees that we take from Olympus Pro is actually used to back the Ohm token itself. So when we look at our bonds that we have here, we can also navigate to the Olympus Treasury and look at which assets actually back the Ohm token in circulation. And this is a really powerful mechanism for Ohm to kind of be that reserve currency for DeFi, where it holds a representative stake in different protocols across the ecosystem. And importantly, this allows us to better reflect that ecosystem as well as be involved in the governance of protocols that we partner with.
Super cool. And can you guys talk about how Frax plays into all of this? Frax, it's not an Olympus product itself, right?
Correct. It's not an Olympus product. Jeff, do you want to maybe talk about Frax a bit?
Frax in terms of like why in what regards do you mean?
Oh, just as one of our partners for
As one
adding
of our
them as the
partners for
second. Yeah.
I'm not familiar with Frax at all. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to person to describe how Frax works under the hood, but basically, it's a it's a stablecoin algorithmic stablecoin that's pegged to $1, if I'm explaining it correctly. And yeah, it was the second reserve token that we took into the treasury after DAI. We work closely with them. We also have Frax ETH SLP bonds, they were also a partner in the Olympus Pro cohort as well, and it's been going well for those bonds as well. But yeah, it's just a reserve that we have, and we work closely with everybody over at the Frax team, Sam and all them.
Okay, cool. So was it kind of just one of the first partners that you guys brought in to the bond market?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yes. Yeah, they were one of you.
And so Ohm is supposed to be backed, by at least $1 of reserve assets. Is the intention for Ohm ever to be a stable coin?
I think on a sufficiently long enough time horizon, you can see kind of that price premium for Ohm trend down over time, especially given the high APY. And yeah, the goal over time is to be a currency for DeFi that has reduced stability relative to volatile assets, but currently Olympus is in the growth phase as reflected by our high APYs, which kind of helps launch the supply of Ohm.
Super cool. Something that I always thought was interesting or thought would be a cool project, and Olympus definitely reminded me of that, would be a stable coin that is backed by these reserve assets, but instead of the value of the stable coin changing, your balance would change. So like in this case, like let's say you you start with 100 ohms or something, or 100 peggies, we can call them, and then the value, let's say over the course of the year, the value of the reserve assets increased 50%. Then at the end of the year, you'd still have tokens that are worth $1, but your balance would increase, similar to how these algorithmic stablecoins with these rebasing stable coins like Adjust Balance. Have you guys thought about that? I haven't seen anyone build something quite like that, but Olympus is the closest thing I've seen to that. But I think it'd be really nice for someone to solve that, because you could still have the benefits of a stable coin pegged to $1, but not have something that's pegged to an inflationary asset, because as the value of the backing increases, your balance could just increase or decrease if the value of the reserves went down.
Yeah, I think that's the idea behind rebasing, and it kind of is similar to Olympus in that regard. I think one of the biggest things that our founder Zeus had seen with rebasing currencies is that they tend to unravel when there are consecutive negative rebasing periods. And so one of the kind of deeper protocol design mechanisms here is that Ohm, when you stake it, will rebase, but it rebases up only, or up only. And on the downside, instead of rebasing negatively and contracting supply, we defend market contractions at risk-free value of Ohm and buy back from the market and burn. So this kind of solves one of the biggest pain points for rebasing currencies, where on those negative rebase events, it actually compounds the sell pressure. And then at the same time, one of the other things that we solved was when the market expects a negative rebase for rebasing tokens that, kind of were very popular last year, people tend to pull liquidity, which is where the idea of protocol-owned liquidity came from with Olympus.
Super cool. Yeah, rebasing tokens are definitely interesting, but it's so far a lot of the experiments have not panned out, I think, quite like the founding teams hoped. So really cool to see just Olympus kind of take all of these very fresh new primitives and evolve them, try and just improve them. What do you guys think? What's on the roadmap? What's the vision for Olympus DAO?
I think the vision for Olympus DAO in the long run is to kind of float that APY down over time as our supply grows, hopefully transitioning into that stability phase and being more like a currency. You can think of the premium on Ohm right now as an expectation of future revenue from staking and rebases. And then a couple of the other mechanisms that we use to provide value to our treasury is investing some of our reserves. So we only need to hold sufficient assets to cover Ohm in circulation at a minimum of 1 DAI of value. And so we can actually take, interestingly enough, where a lot of people's attraction to Ohm is for the high APY, and we get a lot of degens community kind of involvement, and we can actually take these stable assets and invest them to earn high single digit, maybe 12% yield on farming and convex or something on these stables, which you wouldn't necessarily do as a user. I know personally for me, that's not necessarily why I'm in DeFi, is to earn 8 to 12% on holding stables. But the Olympus treasury can do that and kind of have this forced savings regime for our assets that both continues to provide value to our community members and also helps grow our integration with different protocols across DeFi, like the deposits we have in Aave, Convex. I think we have one piloted soon for Compound, and we're also accumulating LUSD because we really think that it's an excellent decentralized currency that we're also going to provide LUSD to the stability module to kind of ensure that it holds its value and maybe earns some LQTY and ETH in return.
Super cool. So you guys, if I understand correctly, you're in the process of taking all of this, these assets in the reserve and actually putting them to work in DeFi.
Yeah, that's true. Because one of the curious things about DeFi is still its underlying dependency on fiat, which is one pain point that Olympus hopes to solve. But we still do have a lot of underlying fiat in our treasury, which we will need to kind of put to work to offset the effects of inflation.
So we have a good question in the stage chat that I'd love to hear your guys' answers to, and I think I know this, but I'd love to hear from your perspective. So someone submitted this via the forum. They were asking, I think, about the bonding program in general. Could this create a cycle of sell pressure? I bond my LP tokens and get more Fox. I sell half that Fox for ETH to get more LP tokens. I use those LP tokens to get more Fox bonds, sell half to get more LP tokens, etc. Is this something you all have seen with other bonding programs, or is that not usually how this works out?
So this is something that we've seen in general for pool 2 liquidity programs. And to kind of shed some more light on this, I think we've already seen that with the price of Fox tokens, not with the bond program itself, but with your current pool 2 liquidity program. If you actually look at the APY that you have on, providing liquidity for Fox ETH, any user who's currently mining Fox ETH liquidity for Fox tokens is incentivized to actually claim those Fox tokens, sell half for ETH and compound their rewards into the pool. The power of compound interest in this regard is why Pool 2 is such a destructive mechanism for the value of governance tokens that are offered in return for liquidity. This is no different with bonds, except that the value that is being provided is actually going directly to the protocol. And in return, we've actually seen several of our initial launch partners who had a big problem with this sell pressure from their Pool 2 APY. Their price of their tokens after launching actually increased as the market prices in the eventual ability to taper off of these Pool 2 liquidity incentives that are having such a drastic sell pressure on their token. So it's no different than Pool 2 liquidity incentives in that regard, but provides long-term value to the protocol instead of renting liquidity.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I'd add on this, because I've certainly thought about this too when we were looking, as a community looking into this and before we voted on the proposal. I think a good way to think about it is those people who are going to, farm the fox and dump are the same people who might go in the bonding program and then basically recompound their fox over time, but it will be less. So like some portion of the people who do bonds are going to be long fox because that's honestly what it's best set up for, and those people will not dump. And so if even half those people or some percentage of them are not doing that, overall it's a net benefit to the pool and the DAO, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree too. And in this case, the DAO at least ends up owning that liquidity as opposed to just renting it. And the cool thing about not being the very, very first project to do this, Olympus has not only piloted it for themselves, and we saw how effective it was on those Dune dashboards, but we were able to look at other projects and how it's worked for them. And I know you can look at the price action on Spell over the past few weeks, and it's just been on an absolute tear. So definitely cool to see that it's worked really effectively for other projects, and we're not just the very first project experimenting with this.
I want to pass over to Never Was, who we invited up, who's got a question.
Yes.
Thanks, John. Question. I posted it also in the chat, but if the DAO is your DAO, the Olympus DAO is holding our token, Fox token, in their treasury, how is it handled, as far as the voting ability and the voting power that you're, obviously if you're holding, you gain a lot of power in our DAO in voting and governance. How is that handled? Is this proxy to the whole Olympus DAO, or is it an individual, going to exercise that voting power? What happens on your end if you are investing in other DAOs as well, holding their tokens in your treasury?
That's a really excellent question. I'm going to pass that over to Jeff, who, by the way, Jeff is the author of our bond mechanism. So he's the programmer over here, as well as just a really, really hard worker on our on-chain governance program that we're rolling out soon. So Jeff, if you want to discuss some of your ideas around how we use those tokens to participate in other
Yeah.
protocols governance.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you for the kind words there, Tex. So yeah, the way, and that's hard because obviously when these Fox tokens go into the treasury, you can kind of say that okay, each Olympus is backed by 0.004 Fox or however much, however many proportionally it is, and I think there's I don't know if that's the best way to go about it, or maybe when on-chain governance goes live and we say, okay, we have this percent of Fox tokens, and if we would be able to vote, maybe have an on-chain vote, like, hey, you individually can't vote, with your Olympus on a ShapeShift Fox proposal, but the treasury itself can make can vote on something based if there is a quorum from the governance from Olympus itself. So if it reaches a quorum, then if Olympus on-chain governance reaches a quorum about voting for something with these particular governance tokens, then we the vote takes place. So that's something I can see. I mean, it's not something we've really explored in depth yet about the best way to do it, but that's kind of off the top of my head, that is the way I would see it being done.
Yeah, and to add to that, one thing I always think about with our treasury holding, other tokens from other protocols is, it entwines us together, inseparably, because we don't ever plan to sell these tokens. So, that is to say that the success of the ShapeShift protocol and the Fox token is a success not only of ShapeShift but also in Olympus too. So whatever, we must act responsibly with that governance power that we're accumulating over time. So not only would we, as Jeff said, be able to, with on-chain governance, vote on what to do, but we're highly incentivized to vote in a way that supports the ShapeShift DAO and the Fox token. So we're highly incentivized to take a long-term view of the success of these protocols that we're ingesting these governance tokens from, for DAO to DAO swaps, but also especially for Olympus Pro.
Understood. Thanks for the answer. Just is there any plans on any of your roadmaps, like where you would maybe consider like vesting or swapping back, like giving us so we then the ShapeShift DAO has vested interest within your DAO, like a 50-50 swap or some type of percentage to where we can just make sure, because I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I appreciate that your vested interest would be in ShapeShift going forward, and DAOs need to work together. That is totally true. But at the same time, unless our DAO members physically invest in your DAO and purchase a token, we don't have that same relationship per se. So that's why I was just thinking that is there any thoughts on your roadmap for where you guys would maybe over a long term, if you start gaining like a couple million or more, 5 million, 10 million, whatever Fox tokens, would you be willing to kind of like split the value of that between the DAOs, where we would gain some of your token voting power and stuff, or is that not something you're even thinking about at this point?
I think that's a really good question. We are certainly open to DAO swaps. The Olympus DAO treasury, which is separate from the protocol treasury, which actually backs Ohm in circulation, but our DAO treasury is sitting on a massive war chest of Ohm right now, and we're looking to provide, some strategic benefits to partners with our assets. And if ShapeShift were to look at Olympus and come up with some mechanism to provide that similar DAO to DAO value of helping on liquidity where we think the value is for Olympus Pro, we would absolutely in a heartbeat execute a DAO swap. But as far as the idea of giving back Ohm for the fees that we take, this is a really interesting question too, because one of the ideas that we've thought about is we really want Ohm to be a common trading pair for assets, similar to how DAI is. It looks a little wacky right now to suggest that Ohm be a trading pair like DAI, but with our partnership with SushiSwap, for example, they've kind of seen how this will play out in the future. And if you actually go to navigate to SushiSwap now, they recently added us as one of their common base assets, looking to the future where we will launch liquidity pools with our partners. So, if we're looking at maybe doing a Ohm Fox liquidity pool at some point in the future, if you wanted to use that as your liquidity source instead of Fox ETH, that would be a natural continuation of the Fox bond program, as well as open up liquidity to a slightly different market. And we would be open to rebating fees denominated in Ohm, which would actually allow you to have that cross DAO governance participation.
That's super cool. And on that note too, Tex, we're about to try this out, or just going through the governance process right now to do a token swap with OneHive of Fox for Honey. And basically, both DAOs will swap $100,000 of their token and then deposit $200,000 of Fox and Honey into a liquidity pool on HoneySwap. So it's another way to have protocol-owned liquidity without renting it. And I think that could make a lot of sense once you guys are ready to have some pools paired with Ohm. Then we could consider doing a token swap and then depositing liquidity to help seed the pool.
Yeah, absolutely.
So right now, if you go to Olympus, you can stake Ohm tokens. What's the API right now? It's quadruple digits for sure. How long do you guys anticipate that healthy APY lasting?
That's really cool. Abby Pup has some good insight into this with, I believe it was OIP 18, right?
Yeah, we've had so many OIPs. I'm super proud of our governance for having so many, but I've just totally lost track of the numbers. I think you're right. It is OIP 18. That OIP, whichever number it ends up being, was the governance framework that we passed that establishes APY bounds depending on the current total supply of Ohm in existence. So right now, I think we're around the 7,400, like 7,400 APYs, somewhere thereabouts. And we have 3.5 million or some such amount of Ohm in existence. By 10 million Ohm in existence, I think we go down to 1,000 APY or something like that. So I can't give specifics anyways off the top of my head in terms of the numbers exactly, but there is a framework in place that's quite formalized and used extensively in our policy making decisions for the reward rate, the rebase rate. So yeah, it's quite formal. You can check it out on our governance forum. Again, I think Tex, you're right. It is OIP 18 that established that.
So in general, as the supply increases, the issuance decreases. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. And that's to the end goal being once we reach a point where Ohm is, hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, don't cross the black cat's path, whatever good luck charm you want. We get to the stability phase with 10 million Ohm, 100 million Ohm out there, or whatever. We've already defined a clear path for tapering off those emissions to be more and more sustainable as time goes on.
Super
Yeah,
cool.
and if you actually look at the supply growth versus reward rate curve, it looks suspiciously like the growth curve of Bitcoin or Ethereum when you look at halving cycles.
Super cool, yeah.
By design. Yeah.
That's awesome. And so did you guys mention yet what time exactly are these Fox and ETH bonds going live?
So I believe we're meeting with you guys right after this to actually launch those bonds on the back end, and then we will have the front end for Fox bonds up this afternoon. So we'll look to an announcement once we get them live and make sure there are no kinks in the bond interface.
Very cool. All right, so community, stay tuned for that announcement and be ready to retweet and check it out as soon as that goes live. And do you guys see any other opportunities for ShapeShift and Olympus DAO to collaborate beyond just this initial bond partnership?
I definitely see an ability to collaborate in terms of enabling buying Ohm, staking Ohm, maybe even like providing some mechanism for Fox holders to get access to the bond program itself through ShapeShift's interface. I see being a really powerful area where we could collaborate because this bond marketplace is only going to grow in time as we add more partners.
That's awesome. And yeah, totally agree. I think there's a strong opportunity for us to give ShapeShift users access to this marketplace natively in our interface.
Yeah, what other areas do you see, Willie? I know you have some really interesting ideas.
I think that's definitely a clear opportunity for a next step. And something that we're also interested in too, we talked about this a little bit yesterday on the Olympus DAO call, is that since you guys are earning protocol fees, if you'd be willing to share a portion of the protocol fees with ShapeShift for the volume that our users drive through our interface, then what the DAO could consider doing is adding an additional Fox incentive for whenever a user uses trades through Olympus bonds, they could basically earn some additional Fox on top of that.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I think that'd be super cool too.
And I think the chat is saying, will KeepKey support Ohm?
Yes. So if we have a KeepKey expert, I want to know if it already supports Ohm on the firmware side. I'm pretty sure it does. If not, we're going to be adding it to Axiom this week, which will mean it'll be supported. Users will be able to send, receive, and trade it. If it's not yet supported on KeepKey firmware, then basically KeepKey users just won't see the information about Ohm displayed on the screen. So it'll show like the amount, but it won't know how many decimals there are, and it won't know what the symbol is. So it's not the ideal UX, but if that is the case and it's not already supported on the firmware, which again, it might already be, then we can add it to the firmware in the next firmware update.
Awesome.
I'm curious. So right now you guys are obviously focused on Ethereum mainnet assets and stuff. Do you have any plans for layer 2 or even other non-EVM chains?
Oh, that's a really timely question. We actually are going to be launching an implementation of Olympus on Arbitrum soon. We're waiting on a couple developments that should actually transpire this week, but we got approval for the Arbitrum implementation through our DAO vote, I believe 3 weeks ago now. But as far as Olympus Pro, we do have plans to expand our bond marketplace and presence on a bunch of different chains. So stay tuned. This will be really awesome to keep an eye on, but not comfortable sharing specifics just yet.
Very exciting. Congrats on getting accepted to Arbitrum. And yeah, it's definitely something that is on our roadmap, is to support these other EVM networks and make it easy for users to bridge between them and access the awesome different protocols on all these different chains.
Yeah, absolutely.
Super cool. Well, we've got a few minutes here. I want to be sensitive of everyone's time, especially because right after this, we got to go hop into the Olympus server to launch this bond program. Are there any final thoughts that you guys want to share with the community while we're here?
I think from my perspective, having been on the community call yesterday with you guys and Eric, I would just like to plug that conversation again. We had a really brilliant conversation, and it's really just awe-inspiring to me to be able to participate in these calls with your community. It just really shows just where our heads are at, and looking forward to collaborating with ShapeShift in the future. Abby, Jeff, you guys have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I'm super
Just
excited
thank you.
to work with you guys, and yeah, like Jeff says, thanks a lot for taking the
No,
time
it was,
to be with
it
us.
was awesome. It's always awesome to talk to new communities, and excited to get these bonds rolled out.
Yeah, thanks guys for taking the time. And Tex, I want to give a special thanks to you for leading the, you've been involved with our community now for like a bit over a month, having discussions with the community, actually going through the whole governance process, putting it up for vote. So thank you so much for spearheading that, and yeah, really looking forward to the launch of this today.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. It's been really awesome working with the community you guys have been nothing but supportive and, really intelligent questions. It's really, really a great community to work with, and I thank you guys for what you guys are building here.
Thank you guys. Thanks everyone for joining today too. Thank you, Jeff, Tex, and Abby for telling us all about Olympus and this new bond program. And stay tuned for the announcement this afternoon when the Fox bonds are live.
Definitely.
Happy bonding,
Thanks again.
everyone.
Happy
3-3.
bonding.
Thanks.
Talk to you later.
Thanks all.